So here's kind of a confession. I went to a fancy, reputable design program. I graduated in 2003, and I would say that I did not know how to do research that was actually useful to my graphic design work until I had been out of school for a solid 10 years. This video isn't about research so much as how research will help your projects, how it helps propel them, how it helps make everything go smoother. And this is the first in 2 videos that address the idea of research. So this one is at a kind of meta level, like why you can never do too much research. The next video will be a basic methodology if you, like me, had no idea what you're doing when it comes to research. I hope you dig it. If you got any questions, comments, suggestions, leave a comment. Enjoy the video. In the first class, we talked about the sequence of stuff, right? So, well, you've got kickoff, actually. And then you've got research, analysis, let's say insight, concept. Maybe it goes to sketching, depending on how you're working, and then some kind of prototype. So like the thing that ends up in the design presentation or the deck. So you have those things, and then you have this other idea that I think should be in place, which is that it should be in the form of this kind of giant triangle, and that these things lead right into each other. And then really you'd end up with like final, beautiful diamond. That's a diamond. Ting, ting, ting. That's beautiful. The thing that I would think about is if you stay in like research, right? And it's like, okay, but if I'm like staying in research, it's like I'm not moving into doing real work yet. But it's almost like if you're on a road trip, you don't want to have to go back to the same place twice for like an inconvenience because you forgot something. So I kind of look at it that if you stay in the research for a little bit longer, it might seem counterproductive because maybe you have a bunch of ideas now, but the more that you do here, the easier all of these other steps are going to get, because one of the things that happens, and the reason it's helpful to do maybe more research than is necessary, is that it means by the time you get to concepts, you're going into that with more concepts. So that the shit that doesn't work out, because lots of stuff doesn't work out, right? Like everyone has designed something where you had an idea in your head and then you couldn't bring that idea to reality. And so if you just go from like, oh, found the idea, and then you move through this cycle and you realize it's not working out, then you end up having to go all the way back here. And you can't even go into your research, you literally have to do more research. It's basically like forgetting your phone at the table at a diner in Indiana and having to turn around and go get it. As opposed to, if you do lots of research and you kind of let yourself do that, you sort of let yourself hang out a little bit too long, that when you move into analysis, that much more stuff comes with you. By the time you get to this concept thing, even if you have one idea you're in love with, and I would argue if you have one idea you're in love with, everything's broken anyway, you should have 5, 10 ideas that you're in love with. When you get here, if the number 1 doesn't work out, there's numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's no going back to Indiana to grab your phone. It's like, okay, cool, I had all these other ideas too. It does a couple of things. 1, you're less likely to spin your wheels working on something that's not working because there's other ideas. It makes it way easier to work on something for maybe only 2 hours and be like, this sucks, it's not working, I'm jumping to the next idea. As opposed to, if that's the only idea, what do? You do it way too long, and then you finally go, well, maybe I should do some more research. So I would argue that like what you want to do is keep all the research in the research phase so that you're just always moving forward. And I just look at it as you get into a certain frame of mind, you don't want to have to go back into a previous frame of mind. in theory, it's not bad to go back to do more research, but you were already in research mode. Now you're trying to make stuff. Like, who wants to stop what they're doing and be like, okay, let's go do some more research? At that point, it's an inconvenience. So let yourself sit in the research for a minute and don't sweat it, and do more than is necessary. Like, even if you have ideas right now, write them down so that you don't forget them. But then know that, one, if those ideas survive, even as you do more research, they must be really good ideas. Two, think about how cool will it be when you're down over here and instead of having your normal one concept, you've got 10. The feeling that that will give you of like fucking invincibility, that is a good spot to be in. And the other thing is that your depth of understanding just gets way bigger. Talking to Adam and being like, looking at 80s movies, maybe that doesn't translate into anything specific that shows up, other than that the depth of understanding as we move down the line, it's just way bigger. And just remember, like, obvious stuff is always great to capture, because one, like, once you're under the gun and under pressure, you forget the obvious stuff. If you didn't, no one would ever need to go back to the grocery store because they forgot the ice cream or the milk or the butter or whatever, you know what I mean? But it's like when you're under pressure, your brain is like, and it kind of shuts down. And that's when it's helpful to have some note about, in this version, there's no yellow oval behind the Batman logo. Because at some point with some other concept, it might all of a sudden be like, wait a second. And it like connects to another thing. And then it goes from nerdy observation to rich concept. We're getting into our first one, research. So why are we doing this? We want to produce a higher quality of work. The other thing is everything else will start happening faster when you start doing more research. Everything flows from research. No research, no flow. And one of the beauties of this stage is like, once you see that and you start seeing these projects, you can't deny that. Like, you can't be like, oh, well, no, I can just jump to concepts. You're like, okay, well, what are the concepts about? This is how you end up with like really nerdy graphic designers whose concepts are only about graphic design, whether they're visual things or like, where they're like, okay, every single poster will be a different Pantone color. And you're like, okay, why? Because, and then they invent some bullshit. Because like, without the research, your idea, you still have to have ideas about something. So everybody ends up having these like very, I don't know, boring graphic design ideas.